Hello, welcome back everyone for another episode with Peter Ingle and Mihai Algiu, going in depth with some of the core teachings of the fourth way. And we are continuing with the study of the human types on the Enneagram. And this is episode 38. We are planning to finish the types, and there are 3 or 4 other previous episodes before that you can see in this playlist. Fragments, reigniting the fragments of the fourth way. And also in this playlist, at about episode 27, we do a few episodes on chief feature. And we have gone into chief feature for each of these type that we've discussed lately, but it's good to know that we really go in depth around episode 27 about chief feature as being the core, let's say, core mechanical type of showing up in the world, some kind of mechanical, unconscious, acting, thinking, feeling, perceiving the world, some core of the ego. And today we have the last type that we haven't addressed would be the solar type. And then after that, we are hoping to do some brief explanation on the subtypes, because in actual reality, it's quite infrequently that someone is like fully that type. And it's more like one is centered in a certain type. Let's say one has like 40-50% Saturn, and then it has a little bit on one of the wings of the Enneagram. So one could be like a Mercury Saturn or Saturn Mars. So there are always combined types, and we'll talk about it very soon. So let's delve into the solar type, Peter.
Yes, the solar type, you see all the other types reflected here just in general. I'll go to the next slide here. The solar type is not on the inner circulation along with the other 6 types. And we'll explain a little bit more why that is. And this type is said to be really under the influence of the sun, whereas all the other types are under the influence of the planets, which includes the moon. And there is this sequence where you can see from the arrows here, we usually begin with the moon, talking about it, that the flow goes from the moon to Venus, to Mercury, to Saturn, to Mars, to Jupiter, back across to the moon. This is the natural progression. And so when types mix, then they mix in the order of this circulation next to each other. You can have a combination of types that are next to each other in this circulation. But the solar type is independent of that circulation. But the solar type is characterized for being active and being positively charged, but it is not necessarily masculine or feminine. And it is sort of a combination. It is can be often androgynous in appearance. And even in psychology, there's not a strong masculine, feminine. There's a blend or a neutrality almost. And we'll be talking more about what that is. And if I go back to this, you see the gland that's influencing this type is what's called the thymus gland. It's right in the solar plexus region. And now this gland a lot was not known about this gland. And according to this typology in the fourth way, this gland is responsible for the development of the organism at birth until a very early age, and somehow was thought to promote the growth of the metabolism, establishing the metabolism of the body, and then known to atrophy, actually, once the body is fully formed. And then the other glands are running things, you might say. But now what are called T cells, which are often used when someone has, say, a cancer or something like that, they will take T cells when their immune system is in jeopardy. They'll take these T cells and basically regenerate a person's immune system from these T cells, these thymus cells. So this is a powerful source, and still it seems as not everything is known about it. But the idea is that the sun influences this gland directly, and this is what gives form to the psychology and the physiology of the solar type. The solar type is often got a very simple line diagram here. You see, this is just given to show somewhat of a large head and then a fragile, somewhat immature body. And you wouldn't be sure whether this is a male or a female. They often have a narrow waist and broad shoulders, but they're fragile. You know, there's the big types in the Enneagram, the Saturn, the Jovial, the Venusian. These are large physical body types. And then the other three, the negatively charged types, are smaller. The Moon, lunar type, mercurial type, and Martial type. The solar type sort of in the middle, but it's delicate. Solars often have transparent skin, sort of milk-like skin, almost like an alabaster perfection of skin. You can see their veins. They're very delicate, long, slender fingers, very fine features. Both their physical features and their facial features can be quite beautiful, almost stunningly beautiful. And as I said, delicate. They can tend to, this thymus is thought to keep them because of the influence of the thymus gland in the sun, they have a youthful appearance, and they maintain this youthful appearance throughout their life. You'll often see someone in their 80s, a little solar lady, and she still looks sort of like a little fairy. She's fairy-like, very delicate and very fine featured and pretty. But this delicate type is also naive and tends to forget to eat, for example. Solars are known for getting ill easily and being subject to illness and not being they're not athletic, as I said. They can be very graceful and delicate and artistic, but they're not necessarily athletic. They're not tough people. They're almost, some can seem electrified. They have very fine energy, can be very creative and energetic and dynamic. And this is full of energy, and they're so full of energy, they're like hummingbirds, but they forget to eat. And when they do eat, they'll eat maybe just some candy. And they'll end up getting sick after a while. I'm generalizing. These are all generalizations about this type, but we'll see as we go on and talk more and give some examples of people that reflect this type.
Yeah, some other characteristics, both physical and psychological. So big eyes, wide eyes, childlike eyes, they are widespread apart. This kind of youthfulness, fairy creature, Peter Pan, the perpetual child, and the medium size. And I mean, they can get taller, but they are not taller in a powerful, imposing way. Still, they maintain this fairy-like Peter Pan-like quality, and they have long fingers. They can have long, but also like delicate or artistic fingers, not like a hard working in the field fingers. And although we say that they are fragile and their body is in that way, we find a lot of solar in ballet, which requires a lot of work and endurance, and of course maybe a lot of ballerinas and ballet male ballet dancers. They can have other types in them, but this archetypal solar beauty and grace, and you can often see in ballet, and yeah, psychologically they have the feeling that they have some kind of more like idealistic and positive outlook, and they have this difficulty that somehow we say that they have undeveloped negative sides of centers, which means that they can't sense that something can go wrong, or people can harm me, or that people can trick me, or they are kind of naive and idealistic, and often they are kind of hit by life, and they are shocked and hurt when people that they trusted, they end up taking advantage of them, and they tend to get, after some of these experiences of being beaten up or shocked or by life, they start to be a little, they feel like, man, this is too heavy here, I don't belong here. It's somehow as if they are not, they are as if coming from like a more higher frequency, so to say, and this earthy realm with its heaviness and suffering, it doesn't feel quite right, and they may have suffering around that, and how can it be that the world is like that? And so this naivete can play out like, or this kind of more like a childlike approach. It can play out intellectually, like being taken advantage, or just believing, being gullible, or emotionally just seeing only the best in people, and not seeing that, you know, this guy is actually a crook, he's tricking me. And also they are kind of naive about their body, you know, like they are not in touch. Sometimes the instinctive center is not in touch with reality, you know, they can be raining and they go out, or cold and they go out in light clothes. There's some kind of ungroundedness at all centers. However, very artistic, creative, can be in all arts, and also some aspiration towards something higher, or some mystical, or religion, or art, or music, or some idea to improve the world, or change the world, or reform, or something like that.
Yes, there's an innocence and naivete and lightness about this type that is unlike the other types, and it can be almost disarming. They kind of can have this electric vibration. So it's like a hummingbird. We often speak of the solar as like a hummingbird, this very high energy, very finely featured, often beautiful, and a lot of the models, male and female models of the last 40, 50 years, that's been the vogue, is this solar type. And some of the other types have tried to be models and have had to resort to anorexia to achieve the look of a solar. Very thin and thin-boned and broad-shouldered and no fat and this kind of thing. But the solar, pure solar type is like that naturally often. And it's as though, as Mihai is saying, they're not, it's as though they don't belong to the planetary world of the Earth and the other planets. It's almost as though they belong more to the solar world, the world of the suns in the galaxy. And this is why the Earth, life here on Earth can kind of seem too heavy. It ought to be more beautiful. It ought to be more wonderful. People ought to be more pure. And it ought to be more fun and light and innocent. And this is how they think, this is how they see the world. And this is why they get easily wounded by the world physically and psychologically. But they have this upbeat spirit. They can be indomitable at the same time. They'll keep going. They'll seem to be indestructible. It's not because they're strong. It's because of their outlook. And so they'll overcome barriers. They don't have these negative halves of centers, as Mihai said, so well developed. So they don't see a barrier as a barrier. They just jump over. They float above it. They keep going. They can be quite successful, in fact, in the business world because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Can be inventive and creative, expressive, artistic. And but this energy, as I say, when a solar walks in the room, everybody, it's so light. It's like light has entered the room a little bit through their frame, through their body, through their persona.
Yeah, I would say a classical example, almost like a caricature, is because solar mixes. That's one thing, is that solar is unique in a way that it can blend with all types. So one can have solar Saturn, solar Mercury, solar jovial, solar Venusian. So it's the only type that can blend with any of the type on the Enneagram, and depending of the mixture, that will kind of have a different hue. But more like more of a pure solar, I would say Michael Jackson would be a good example of that.
You know, now that you mentioned that, Mihai, I've got some examples here from history
Hmm.
of solar types, some of whom are mixed types.
Mm-hmm.
And on the top left, there's Hans Christian Andersen,
Mm.
who, of course, wrote fairy tales. This is no accident. He wrote fairy tales,
Mm-hmm.
stories for children, even though they can have strong spiritual meaning, inner meaning, psychological truth in these fairy tales. They're nevertheless these light, airy, almost otherworldly stories.
Mm.
And then in the middle, William Blake. And this Hans Christian Andersen seems to have been more like a Saturn solar.
Yeah.
Whereas William Blake in the middle on the top there is this jovial lunar solar. And he did these very unusual drawings and paintings and wrote these beautiful ethereal poems, very artistic and very known for his vivid, unusual imagination and having visions, in fact, and seeing things. And so quite solar. And then on the right, Lewis Carroll, that was his pen name, of course, and who wrote Alice in Wonderland. Again, a childlike, innocent story,
Mm-hmm.
although having an inner meaning.
Mm.
And on the lower left, Rainer Maria Rilke, the German poet, probably a lunar solar, but you see as the eyes set wide apart, solars are known for this tall, broad forehead, but something slightly ungainly about their look. All of these faces, you see, there's something beautiful and yet a little bit ungainly. In the middle there, the actress, you know, who's famous for her role in The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland.
Mm.
We often have used her as an example of a solar, big eyes, spread apart, broad forehead, an angelic, almost otherworldly look. And when you watch that movie, that famous old movie, the original Wizard of Oz,
Hmm.
she's like that. She's this light, fairy, innocent, idealistic. Oh, I want to just get back home. And she's befriended by these animals, and and then meets the bad witch and the good witch. It's very
Hmm.
an innocence about the story, and she was perfectly cast in that role for that. And then on the right, Fred Astaire, the famous dancer, who maintained this youthful look all his life,
Hmm.
and danced almost in the air. He was almost dancing off the ground. I highly recommend you go back and watch this man dance. He's unbelievable. And it's very solar. He has a typical solar frame, much like the one I was showing a moment ago, like this. This is almost the body of Fred Astaire, you could say, as a man, the male body.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we come more contemporary, you can see here,
Hmm.
you mentioned Michael Jackson. That's why I started looking
Yeah.
at these. Michael Jackson there on the bottom, very solar and, light. In fact, he named his property Neverland, I think, from the Peter Pan story.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's kind of uncanny. You see the wide eyes, the broad forehead, the very delicate features, albeit he had plastic surgery and so on. But you can see in all of these faces a youthfulness, an innocence, a refinement, a beauty, a delicacy, and somewhat of a naivete, an innocence.
Mm.
And you can see that, if you look at the man on left on the bottom, that's David Bowie. And then the lady on the right, Tilda Swinton, the actor,
Mm-hmm.
they are almost duplicates of one another. And they both can appear to be masculine or feminine. They're not quite grounded in either. It's a very interesting. And then you see the Audrey, I forget the lady's name, the French actress in the bottom there next to Tilda Swinton. Look at those eyes. Look at that innocence, this cherub, young, eager, innocent, delicate. And then Audrey Hepburn on the top left, of course. Taylor Swift, who's now very popular, probably a Saturn solar. And then Timothée Chalamet, who's now famous these days in the film world, who, again, look at the fine features, the broad forehead, the youthfulness. And on the top right is a man named, he's a football player, professional football player. And you see the broad eyes. I don't know if you can see it because of the double screen there. I'm not sure. But eyes wide, set apart, broad forehead, very youthful. This type is often graceful and beautiful, but not super athletic. You did mention ballerinas and ballet dancers, and those are exceptions. And this young man plays football, but there's something about him that's very solar. Maybe he's a Mercury, Saturn solar.
Yeah, and David Bowie and Tilda, they are pretty tall, 6 feet or more, and they're like probably solar Saturn. What is interesting about this is that because they have this frequency or vibration, this lighter, beautiful, refined, idealistic, open, they are attractive. They are people, all the other types are somehow attracted to them. There's some pull, they are charismatic. It's almost like you're like, oh, I like that. I like some more of that. The other types are drawn towards them. And what is interesting about the solar is that it's unique in a way that all the previous type, they have certain set maximum attraction. Like the Saturn is attracted to the lunar and to the Saturn, or the Venusian is attracted to the Martial, and then the Mercury is attracted to the jovial, and so on. They're all these combinations, but somehow the solars, they have a free range of attraction. They can be attracted to any of the types, and any of the type can be attracted to them. And that is interesting.
And solars often will feel that other people are attracted to them. And they may not necessarily be that attracted to another type. It's not the same earthly, cellular, human kind of attraction, magnetic attraction that is shared by the other types. Again, this solar, this sun effect, this otherworldliness, but they feel that other people are attracted to them. Look at the energy of these faces, how all these slightly disarming. If I put up here a bunch of mercurial actors and performers and celebrities or jovials, even though they might look at you directly in the camera, it wouldn't be with the same honest innocence.
Yeah,
It's very interesting. You can feel this solar energy here on the screen. Naivete, though, we're all naive in different ways, but this is pervasive. This is predominant in this type. And it's partly why they're disarming and attractive, because they're not weighed down. Although this type too can be partly because of their beauty and their idealism, they can be vain. They can be quite vain about their looks. And they know, as I said, they recognize other people are attracted to them. And this can foster a personality that is infused with vanity, thinks itself unique, and thinks of highly of itself. And also because of their fine energy, this sort of electric magnetism that's flowing through them, they can also have power. they can have this, it's almost like a naive power, but they'll be very direct. They'll be very, can be, what's the word? Well, they can be a little bossy, a little demanding. And they're not usually the big manager who has a power feature, who's bossing everyone around and running the show, but they will stand their ground a little bit and be insistent and make their demands and expect their demands to be met. So it's another variation on power, which we've talked about before.
There's this, what you mentioned, of some specialness. They may develop the sense of specialness, as vanity, and there's also, they have a sensitivity. They are less endurance and less, so they're sensitive, with all that comes with it. And now, as we are going to talk about mixed types, combined types, basically the solar can combine with any type, and the effect of it, it's a little bit like two colors. You have a color here and another color here, and then you combine it, you put some of this color in that color, is going to change the hue. So the solar color in flavor, frequency, if you add it over any of the other type, it makes it a little lighter. So let's say you have a solar Saturn, so it's going to diminish that kind of seriousness and serious, heavy, silent, big, introverted, guarded, and make it more lighter, more charming, a little more loosen up, a little more versatile. If you take again like a martial, like the warrior, the impulsive and fiery and justice and the military and all of that, you add some solar on it, it makes it still martial, but it has a combination of warrior with a child now somehow. I see somehow a little bit in, let's say, Mel Gibson when he was younger and stuff like that. It's a solar martial or Mars solar. With a Venusian, again, like a Venusian, it can be more like, tends to get kind of passive and more like non-existent, more like just lying down or not spending energy, or with add some solar now, solar Venusian now can be more, infuse more energy into it, more ideas, more initiative, more, it changes, and it changes the blend somehow towards some of the qualities of the solar.
Another thing worth mentioning about this type, this has to do with the attractiveness of this type. They vibrate with this very fine energy that to other types can almost feel like sex energy. But the solar type does not necessarily feel sensual. The solar type, when it comes to sex energy, it's not like that. It feels this attractiveness and this interest, and it likes people, and it's vibrating at this high energy, but it's not looking at the other types in the same, let's say, animalistic, bestial, human way that the other types look at each other sexually, kind of as potential mates or as a potential lover or sexual target, something like that. The solar type is not, and sometimes other types are surprised. They think the solar is so beautiful and looks so sexual and has this sex energy. And then they've just come to discover it's not like that. They're not sensual in a, how to say, earthly, physical way. Yeah. This is a subtle point, but there's something, and they're elusive. This type is elusive, almost like they're floating or flying away. They're a little bit elusive in this, and also in this area, that in the sexual area or arena, they remain kind of elusive and mysterious.
Yeah, and therefore it's very important now for solar. It's a lot of these solar artists in the business world and entertainment, and they are naive and idealistic, and and then they don't realize that this producer actually has nefarious intentions, or they want to use me and all of that. So basically they are going to be shocked and suffer, basically. And the idea for a solar on a spiritual path, it needs to somehow, while maintaining some of this expansive, open appreciation of refinement, beauty, and all of that, somehow they need to grow up in a way of becoming less naive and become more grown up, more discerning, and more grounded in all centers. And kind of through the mistakes, to learn, the training is to realize that it's not here like a kingdom of heaven, fairyland. And then one needs to be somehow careful and to engage these other discerning qualities that we have mentally, emotionally, and then to learn how to be grounded about their body, how to take care of the instinctive center. Somehow the instinctive center of the solar needs to learn to be more, to eat the right time, and not just chocolate or ice cream, and to take care of their body, and to take care of finances and the lifestyle, and various things like that.
And also related to this idea of eating, Mihai, that I'm just jumping in here to say that because the type vibrates with such fine energy and it thinks it can run on this energy alone, it will forget to eat and it will neglect its diet, and then it will suffer. It will become ill or weak and or run out of energy. And then this will make it. This type has a tendency toward sort of freneticism. They'll get so excited and then frenetic, and then they haven't eaten, and then they'll start to get all out of whack, and they'll lose their grounding quickly and easily. And this is why it is useful for someone who's solar to make sure they try to eat 3 times a day and eat something good, eat something solid, and not just, as Mihai was saying, sugar and sugary like foods and fast carbs, or skipping food altogether. They feel, I don't need to eat. I don't have time to eat. I don't have the energy. It doesn't even occur to them. They will not think about it, and then they will suffer. And so sometimes it takes time for a solar to go through that difficult lesson, sometimes many times, getting ill or feeling weak and being taken advantage of. And they need to do the same, have a same kind of approach to their diet when it comes to their emotional life and other people. They need to be aware of who they're spending their time with. Find a kind of a reliable base of friends who are reliable, who they can trust, who will almost take care of them. You'll often find another type who is taken a solar under their wing and is taking care of them, because the solar is childlike and innocent and naive, doesn't know how to take care of itself. And so you'll see another stronger type come in, take care of them, and sometimes in doing so, take advantage of them. And yes, this naivete plays itself out in all the centers. Someone who's solar wants to try to ground themselves in a common sense way in all their centers.
Marilyn Monroe, although she was curvy and voluptuous, as far as I remember, there's a strong flavor energy, and yeah, it seems like she herself didn't see her in this as the ultimate sex symbol, but everybody was seeing her like that. And yeah, interesting.
Yes, I was saying to Mihai earlier that when he and I were talking, that this naivete feature, you see, each feature, interestingly enough, is blind to itself. And the naivete does not realize it is naive. The solar type does not realize that it's forgetting to eat or that it's trusting someone too much. It doesn't see that. And so this type like all the types with their particular features, their characteristic features, it takes time to see. It's not that we have a chief feature, it is that we are in this vortex of our chief feature and don't know it. And then when we start to observe ourselves in this way and with this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, we start to see how we are behaving, what kind of psychology is driving that behavior, and then what the nature of this thing called a chief feature is, which is behind both.
Well, I feel like we covered all the main types thoroughly. What we encourage to the people watching this, that are not just watching intellectually and all of that, but they're interested to see this in themselves and see it in other people. It's important to mention that this it's hard to see this type in while being asleep and being identified with some judgments or some thoughts or positionality, or being lost in daydreaming, half asleep. We cannot see this correctly because there's too many moving parts. Yeah, but the more present we are, the more out of the mind and more aware, present, space, open, aware, having this knowledge, which takes some time. It's good to make notes and all of that, have photos, but having this knowledge to kind of, then we can just see other people, or we start with ourselves actually first. So that's the way to go about it. And I encourage to people who are coming to working with us or coming to our groups, I encourage them to, hey, just listen to this information and just see where you recognize yourself. Make some notes. You may recognize yourself in several types. Just make some notes, and that's the beginning to identify your own type. And the idea, now we are coming to this idea of the mixed types. Yeah, it's very unlikely we are not a full-on 100% one type, but we are more, we have a maximum center of gravity, let's say, into one of the types. Like we have 50% or 40-50% anchored in one type, and then we can have 20 or 30% of another type, and another 15% of all types. That's the idea, that we all have all types within, but just one, two, three that are more hues of that. And what's important is that they combine on the Enneagram path, as you see it here. So we really recommend for people interested to maybe screenshot this one, this slideshow, as well as the previous one with blue that we showed before, and to see exactly the trajectory, the path, because basically, starting with lunar, it can only be a lunar Venusian or a jovial lunar. Yeah, these are the only combinations possible of the lunar. And of course, solar can add on it. One can have a solar, lunar, yeah, but it's just in these two combinations. So it doesn't combine lunar with Saturn or lunar with Mercury within oneself. That's why it's important to have this printout and understand the pathway on the Enneagram. That will also help a lot in deciding or deciphering one's own type. And about this mixed type, what it is, it's what I mentioned before, as if we have two colors that are different. Yeah, let's say you have a Mercury color and you have the Saturn color. Yeah, so Mercury is a short, wiry, quick-minded, a little bit deceptive, a little bit manipulative, very quick, very smart, opportunistic, intelligent, funny, in the light, in the show, small, wiry. Yeah, that's the Mercury character flavor. And the Saturn now is like bigger, taller, more serious, grounded, leader, father, teacher, control, dominance. So you see, now the person will be on this range So if you have like a Mercury Saturn now, it will be a mixture of this, and depending how much Mercury, how much Saturn, is going to create a new hue, which is it's a thunder. It's a hue that is like a mixture. It creates almost like a different flavor of the combined, both physical and psychological tendency of that type. So a Mercury Saturn will be maybe taller than just a pure Mercury. And then that Mercury Saturn will be a little bit more active and more dynamic and less serious all the time than if it just were a pure Saturn. And the same goes with all of the mixed types. And we can just go briefly through some of them. If you want to pick up one or anything you want to add on what I said, or
Not right now, no. Since we have a little space here, I will try to fill it. I'll say that we're getting now into more subtleties when it comes to this combination of types, and it's not necessary to pinpoint all this right away. It will become apparent. For example, what we talked about today about solar, if a person is predominantly solar, they will relate very much to the things we said and the descriptions we gave and the examples we showed. It'll just be sort of check, check, check. Yes, yes, yes. Wow, that's me. But if, let's say, you are a lunar Venusian primarily, and you have some solar mixed in, you may recognize a little bit of that, but it wouldn't be so prevalent. But it nevertheless would be there. You would have that, some of these solar tendencies. And so this takes time to discriminate between, to discern the differences and to see how they combine also. Because when you start combining these types like the way we're describing now, it can become quite, it's like now there's 3 hues. Mihai was mentioning you add this hue of solar to a type, and then you have 2 types, combination of 2 types, and then there's some solar. Or maybe a person is predominantly solar, but they are also somewhere between the lunar and the Venusian type. So it'll be more that they're solar. They have characteristics of a lunar and Venusian. I mean, here, we can see this.
Yeah, I would say Audrey Hepburn could be like a solar Mercury, or solar Mercury. Yeah, I'm not sure how tall she was, but more like a solar Mercury.
And she may be the most solar in this grouping here. She may just be almost like pure solar. And if you saw her perform and sing and dance, it really, the effervescence of her type comes through. Whereas Tilda Swinton down there on the bottom right, she's more severe, like a Saturn. She's very Saturn, and yet has this solar quality about her. And so different than, say, the lady next to her on the bottom, the French actress. Again, I'm sorry, whose name I forget.
Yeah.
Very mercurial.
Is like 6 feet, I recently found out. So it makes sense. Solar Saturn.
Yeah.
And same with David Bowie.
Yes, and he has a severeness, especially in this picture. But he was very solar with his music and his costumes and his artistry. And again, Taylor Swift more on tending toward the Saturn side, but with a strong dose of solar.
Now, one thing that it's this idea that these types, they have inbuilt, whether if it's a more pure type or if it's a mixed type, they have inbuilt maximum attraction. And this is more like what they are drawn to, what nature arranged, somehow God arranged that they are drawn to, and they are kind of somehow a good match. They're polar opposite although sometimes these polar opposites, they are so polar opposite and so charged that it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a wonderful, harmonious friend relationship. Might be fiery and turmoil and drama and all of that. Also depends on the level of consciousness of the type. That's the thing, because we have all the types, as I said before, but one can be a really unconscious, asleep type, and then one can have the same type, but one has done a lot of work on oneself, and one has somehow transcended some of the core mechanical tendencies. One is more balanced, and one is able to work with negative emotions and triggers and projections. So the more conscious those maximum attraction is, the more chances for it to work in harmony. But the idea is that there's a maximum attraction on the Enneagram. So that's important to have the Enneagram and see, like, you know, lunar with Saturn, and jovial with Mercury, and Mars and Venus. Solar is a floater. But now if you have a Mercury Saturn, now you take this in account. So the Mercury Saturn type may be has attraction or compatibility with a jovial lunar, which is again opposites based on the Enneagram. Or Mars jovial type will be attracted towards the Venus Mercury type. And the idea is that we have this maximum attraction. There are other types that are somehow neutral. There's not big attraction or repulsion. And then some types, they have a lack of compatibility. They are too similar. There's no energy, doesn't drawn towards each other. So it's really important now in choosing or in observing. Even you can observe past girlfriends, boyfriends, lover, wife. And we sometimes try to choose from the head psychologically, like, oh, I like her because there's these qualities and this or that. But actually there's a lot of unconscious happening this at the level of the sex center. Our sex center is not just responsible for sex energy and creativity, but it's like a quick scanner, very quick scanner that subconsciously, without any words, can scan and feels like some kind of, oh, like a yes, or partly yes. Yeah, that's the sex center is able to feel that. And I'm not even necessarily for sexual partner, but for a certain compatibility. And
also, we can walk into a room, we can go to a party or a gathering, and there will be people, and even walking down the street, there will be people we immediately notice. We take notice.
mm-hmm.
We are drawn to them, and because of that, we take notice of them. These are more in the range of our maximum attraction for some reason. And then there'll be people, we'll look at them and we'll see them, and there'll be a, we won't like them. There'll be not a repulsion, but certainly not an attraction, but an obvious lack of attraction. And it will turn us off almost slightly. But this is sometimes hard to discern. And then there's the third category, and that's where we don't actually notice the person. We don't notice some people at all. We see them, but nothing gets registered because we're neither attracted nor repelled by them in any sort of magnetic way. And this is all based on type largely.
And some combinations are for this kind of, let's say, romantic, sexual. There's like a fiery magnetism. Other combinations are less fiery, but they are good partnership in business, or a good partnership in an expedition or a team or things like that. So this knowledge has a lot of application in terms of navigating human dynamics, and especially one is a manager or a captain of a ship or a boss. That can be very, very helpful. I have a good friend of mine who was steeped into this knowledge, and then he was like a big manager of a gas company or in the military, and he knew who this person was there. He would give them a sweets, or he would give them this, or he would he wasn't trying to manipulate them, but he knew how to talk to them. He knew what to expect from them. And he knew that this is not a good idea to put this Mercury with this Marshall in a team, or it's not a good idea to put this Lunar to be a manager or a leader. So he, in a way, through his knowledge of the types, he could see what's the right tool for the job and for the best of the success of the operation. Peter Uspensky was talking in his book, in The New Model of the Universe. He was saying that, I mean, now this knowledge is lost. We are trying to retrieve it and revitalize it. But this knowledge was known in the past, and ancient priests and, you know, how the civilization, when there would be rites of marriage or something, the rite of marriage was not just some kind of, okay, you know, do you say yes and I bless you and you take her forever, and it's like a just mechanical ceremony. It was apparently, Uspensky was saying that the priest who was familiar with the type and familiar with the couple, he will assess them if they're a good match. And that was determined if it's a good match. And only then they will officiate the ceremony. And that was lost.
And also the idea is not to master this knowledge in such a way that we can make everything sort of perfect in our relationships or in our people we work with and all this, but to understand this is a blueprint for human dynamics, laws of attraction, laws of psychological behavior, laws of compatibility and incompatibility. This is like a blueprint of the human dynamism that runs the engine of cultures and countries and humanity at large. And there's meant to be discomfort, friction, misunderstanding, confusion, disagreement, repulsion, just as there's meant to be attraction and pleasantry and comfort and delight. All of these are part of the whole. And there's a reason why all these things happen between people. And that's what these ideas here are pointing to. This is why they're so profound. They really are this quite unusual map or blueprint of how these different types operate and interact and respond to one another and react to one another. And it's quite multi-layered and extraordinary the more you see it.
Another idea is that this knowledge about the types, basically knowing about these types, we understand about the essence of a person. You know, this knowledge we shared so far, we have some understanding now what's the essence of a Saturn, what's the essence of a Marshall, as well as how one will be the personality of a Saturn and the personality of a Marshall. That's the knowledge we shared so far here. So this is helpful to help us navigate this process of self-knowledge, or the psychological machine knowledge, knowing oneself at this relative level, and helps with in some way to know what is some weakness and what's some area of work, and that will help us to become more conscious and less fall into the vortex of the imaginary I, as Peter said. But also it helps to understand and to accept certain things, you know, rather than, like, you know, Mercury will be like, find the path, and they're like, man, what's wrong with me? I'm this sneaky like this. I don't know why I can't just go and tell them like this. And my vanity is so strong, and I keep wanting to be a showman. Wow, man, what's happening? So getting the knowledge, be like, dude, that's how it is meant to be. That's how it is. You know, that's your thing, and ultimately it's not bad. So just bring some awareness to it, and that will fall into place in a way. You know, so it helps from this point of view. But also when people in my group, we talk about these things and they say, oh yeah, what am I, and I'm this and you are that, and that's a little tricky, because we shouldn't forget that what we are going for here too is for the ultimate identity, for the essential identity, for the true identity, which was before the type, after the type. Yeah, so we are going here for the presence to be recognized, the presence, the being, which is listening to this knowledge and looking at these images, and the being needs to recognize itself and get more stronger in a way to be less sucked into sleep. And then that's what we are. That's the real identity that has the vehicle of the body mind of a jovial or a Mercury or for a Venusian.
Yes, and that's the primary, by far, the primary value of knowing this information is to enable our awareness to become more conscious of noticing all these things that we're describing about ourselves and about other people, and not identifying with it and not losing itself in that vortex, not being sucked down into it, and being able to become more conscious as itself more often. And from this perspective, and we've said this before, from this perspective, this is a blueprint of who we are not, and a blueprint of what other people are not in terms of consciousness. None of this is consciousness, none of this behavior, none of this physical appearance, none of this psychological apparatus that we've been describing. None of it is consciousness itself. And this is, as I say, by far the primary value of understanding this. Now, a person can take this knowledge, and you see even with the study of personality types, which is a very, I would say, inaccurate offshoot of this knowledge. Even the military tries to use it to organize itself. Companies use it in human resources departments to try to understand and position people and organize and become more efficient, effective, harmonious work environments and things like that. But that's pales in comparison to this idea of seeing all of this from the perspective of consciousness itself in such a way as to not be identified. So this knowledge becomes like a platform which we can lift off from consciously and start to look at ourselves and look at other people and look at human dynamics objectively without losing ourselves in what we see.
Well, I feel like we have covered what we wanted to cover about this knowledge, and feel free, people listening to this, to send us questions about this. We are going to continue with this series of reigniting the fragments of the fourth way. Not sure what we are going to cover next. If there are any topics of interest for you that are connected with fourth way, let us know. And thank you, and may this help you become more conscious of what you are, what you are not. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.